In around 450 BC, the Persian Empire was at the peak of its power, and the king who took the throne name Ahasuerus came to the throne, gaining control of a huge kingdom spreading from India to Ethiopia, and controlling the amassed wealth. The Assyrians, 250 years earlier, had raided the nations and accumulated great wealth, and then the Babylonians had taken it from them. But now the Persians have extended that, taking the wealth of Babylon and establishing the glory of the Persian kingdom. Ahasuerus, in the 3rd year of his reign, holds a grand party to show off his wealth and his power. He is thinking that it is his. He does not understand that God puts people in power, and he takes it from them as well. So this party was held in Susa, also known as Shushan, secure fortress city, in the courtyard of the king's palace, decorated with white and blue curtains, supported by silver rods and marble pillars, with gold and silver couches spread around a magnificent pavement of alabaster, turquoise, white and black marble. Drink was served in golden vessels, each uniquely crafted, and there was plenty of wine, because of the king's generosity. But drinking was not compulsory, because the king ordered that all the officers of his household, that they should do according to each man's pleasure. The women were not included in this celebration, and so the queen, Vashti, also made a feast for the women in the royal palace that belonged to King Ahasuerus. The main celebration lasted 6 months, but then there was a special celebration for the citizens of Shushan for another 7 days. And after Ahasuerus had become somewhat drunk, on the 7th day he decided to cap off his celebration by parading the beauty of his beautiful queen, Queen Vashti. And so he sent his 7 eunuchs to fetch her, so that the people would see the beauty of the queen, because she was very beautiful. But Queen Vashti refused to come at the king's command brought by his eunuchs, and the king was furious. His anger burned within him. Therefore the king said to the wise men who understood the times, for this was the king's manner toward all who knew law and justice, those closest to him being Karshina, Shetha, Admatha, Tarshish, Meres, Marsina, and Memucan, the 7 princes of Persia and Media, who had access to the king's presence and who ranked highest in the kingdom. What shall we do to Queen Vashti according to law? Because she did not obey the command of King Ahasuerus brought to her by the eunuchs. And Memucan answered before the king and the princes, Queen Vashti has not only wronged the king, but also all the princes and all the people who are in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus. For the queen's behaviour will become known to all women, so that they will despise their husbands in their eyes, when they report, King Ahasuerus commanded Queen Vashti to be brought in before him, but she did not come. This very day the noble ladies of Persia and Media will say to all the king's officials that they have heard of the behaviour of the queen. Thus there will be excessive contempt and wrath. If it pleases the king, let a royal decree go out from him, and let it be recorded in the laws of the Persians and the Medes, so that it will not be altered, that Vashti shall come no more before King Ahasuerus. And let the king give her royal position to another, who is better than she. When the king's decree which he will make is proclaimed throughout all his empire, for it is great, all wives will honour their husbands, both great and small. And the reply pleased the king and the princes, and the king did according to the word of Memucan. Then he sent letters to all the king's provinces, to each province in its own script, and to every people in its own language, that each man should be master in his own house, and speak the language of his own people. My name's Arthur, and I thank you for joining me as we share Ahasuerus' response to Queen Vashti's disobedience. We've read together from Esther, chapter 1. The king, although he is king, being extremely angry, seeks advice from his lawyers as to how to deal with Queen Vashti. What does the law say? Now it seems that the law doesn't have a rule that can be applied as it stands, and so they propose that the king make a law. And the law basically that is proposed is that a wife must do what her husband tells her to do, that each man should be master in his own house and speak in the language of his own people. Now we learn that marriage was invented by God and established as the fundamental unit of society. Therefore the scriptures have a lot to say about the relationship between a husband and a wife. There is a principle which is supported in the New Testament and is right throughout the Old Testament, that God has given the responsibility of headship to the husband. But is it a matter of law? When Paul presents this proposition, it says it is to be a matter of love. The wife is to submit to her husband because of the complete love that the husband has for the wife. In other words, she obeys because she is loved, not just because of the marriage contract. And you can't make a law for love. But this is what Ahasuerus is doing. He's making a law that each man should be master of his own house and speak in the language of his own people. Once you have a law, then you must have a penalty for disobeying the law. And unfortunately, domestic violence is a huge problem in our society today, because men are not loving their wives, and wives are not obeying their husbands or their menfolk, because in many cases they're not even married. But there is an expectation that the woman should do what the man says, that the man should be master in his own house, and because it is a matter of law in their thinking, they think violence is justified to try and impose their will. In this case, because Vashti had been disobedient to her husband, this law would be applied retrospectively to her, and she would lose her royal position. She would no longer come before the king. And this law was proposed because it would be good for society, so that all women would have to fear their husbands. We're replacing love with fear. But perfect love casts out fear. Queen Vashti had refused to come and be displayed to men because of her beauty, because she was a person. She was not an object to be paraded. She was a person to be respected. But King Ahasuerus has not respected her as a person. He has just viewed her as a possession, as a thing, and so he will depose her. But these wise men have not been that wise after all. They have proclaimed a law which makes the king feel good. It appeases his anger, but it is not the best solution to the problem. It is not the solution that God would have made. The king's decree, which he has proclaimed throughout all the empire, all wives will honour their husbands, both great and small, that each man should be master in his own house and speak in the language of his own people. It's a rule of law. But what do we think about the matter? How do we respond? What is the relationship? How will we maintain the relationship between a husband and a wife? How do we implement the plan that God put in place? The New Testament asserts that the husband is head of the wife, even as Christ is head of the church, and the wife is to submit to her husband, because the husband will lay down his life for the wife.